Welcome, Margaret.
Just in case. Well, hello everybody. We have just had a very good series of lectures entitled Who Determines the View? I now want to give a talk tonight saying what lies within the view. And I am calling them treasures of Upper Teesdale. I'm going to show a large number of, I didn't intend to do that yet, sorry. I'm going to show a large number of photographs of plants. It's possible that some of you, if you've only got small screens, may have difficulty seeing them. Well, that ain't my fault. I will be saying the names of the plants. I'm just wondering, though, how... Oh. Okay, it looks as if I just click on this and I get the next slide. Well, there's the next slide to show you all of the treasures of Teesdale. I put this little screen, little picture on the side so you get an idea of the size. Common daisy there, spring gentians there. Some of the rare plants of Teesdale are the dwarf milkwort. Can you see my pointer? Dwarf milkwort, mountain avens, Teesdale violet, hoary rock rose there, and alpine forget-me-not. How do I get rid of this lot? I don't seem to be able to make my screen small, my picture setup smaller. All right then, of the Teesdale, you probably come across this before, that in the Teesdale Flora, we have got Arctic, alpine and northern species. Here's a few of them. Scottish asphodel, clump there, here's flowers. These are rather flat leaves, a bit like the bog asphodel, but much shorter. Alpine meadow foxtail in the middle, only found at high altitude. False sage, I don't know if you can see both pictures. I've got two here. This shows it in flower, and the one at the right shows it in fruit. Dwarf forget-me-not at high altitude again, and dwarf birch. A small group of alpine species, actually, alpine forget-me-not is alpine and not in the Arctic. Gentians are alpine. Yes. Sorry. Oh, save the area. Blue mulgrass just coming into flower. Well, flower head showing on the fell. This is also alpine, not Arctic. There are also a number of northern species in north of England, only in the United Kingdom. I'm afraid we get a repeat of the gentian because that's only in the north of England. We've got the shrubby cinquefoil in the north of England in Teesdale, and a few crags in the Lake District. It's also in the far west of Ireland in Era, and alpine forget-me-not again is a northern species. This lady's mantle and two other meadow ones. This is large-toothed lady's mantle. And then we've also got bird-eye primrose. Now, the important thing about the Teesdale flora and why it is so special is because it's got southern species as well as Arctic alpine species. So we've got the early spring sedge shown here, not quite in flower, sorry. Oh, how can I go backwards? No, that's going forwards. Ah. I don't know how to go back. Well, I meant to show you photographs of the southern species. I did start with spring sedge. We've also hello.
Sorry, Margaret. I know you. If
It's
you
okay.
on your keyboard, if you use the back arrow key, that should take you back.
Oh, thank you.
Right. I couldn't think of any other way of contacting you.
That's all right.
Bye.
Right, thank you.
Just hold the arrow key to go forward. Yes.
Six northern species I've mentioned. And the very important group, the southern species. Southern species, early spring sedge, hoary rock rose. Two colours. I don't think you've noticed those. Dwarf milkworth and horseshoe vetch must have been much more common, say, in the beginning of the 19th century, judging from the quantity that appears as dried specimens on in many of the national herbaria. Now, a very rare plant, two clumps the size of my hand. Here's a photograph of a bit of the turf on Cronkliffe. This has got mountain avens, leaves there, Arctic alpine species, and early spring sedge. I think there's a bit of rock rose, hoary rock rose there. And here we've got another species which is certainly more common in the south, which is the small scabious. Well, how come that we've got this mixture of plants here together? Plants of the north, south, and plants of the south. I think Teesdale is the present of south species that makes it so very special because only in the very far west of Ireland do you get a combination of northern and southern species growing together. Understandably, we are more northern, they are more southern, but both areas have got northern and southern together. Well, we've got to go, sorry, we've got to go back to uh, the last ice age. That is some 10 to 12,000 years ago. Teesdale had its own glacier centered on Cross Fells, so it was unique in that respect. The glacier created much ground up rock as it moved slowly over the ground. This is obviously taken in the Alps. Well, not obviously. There's a glacier up there being fed by snow patches. And here we've got the remains. These are on the sides of where the glacier was. This is where sorry, well, the glacier would have travelled down. This would have been the base of it here, and on each side, leaving lots of ground up rock. In Teesdale, this would have included limestone, including sugar limestone, sandstone, shale, which would have become fine clay-like material. And these plastered the hill slopes. But when the ice disappeared, it left a lot of vacant ground, all ready for colonization, which plants came in from east, from Europe across the North Sea, and from the south, and particularly also the southwest, coming up from the Iberian Peninsula through France, touching on the south, the very southwest of England and into Ireland. But the bulk of our plants would have come in from the east and the south, where they had survived in what we call refugia. How do we know all of this? We're fortunate in that, we're fortunate in that a lot of work was done by Dr. Judy Turner of Durham University and her students, taking many cores of peat in the reservoir basin and in the areas above, parts of Ridgebank Fell, Tingleside, Redsyke Boss, Tinkler's Boss. And from their work, going back to the end of the Ice Age, pre-glacial, and at this level of the junction of the glacial deposit known as glacial till and the blanket bog lying on the top of it is where a few years ago flints, so-called flints, are actually made of chert, which you obtain locally, flint-like substance. And there's one example. It's about 3 centimeters long. Right, what about the vegetation? Well, that's determined from what pollen could be found. And here we've got the results of counting mainly the tree pollens, then grass and sedge, and dwarf shrubs. At the beginning of the period that they were able to examine, there was, juniper, there was dwarf birch, there was also some probably hairy birch, and then later you began to get pine coming in. Notice large amount of willows here, so that early stage you got birch, a little bit of pine, uh, willows of different kinds, juniper, uh, grasses, a lot of sedges, and dwarf birch, at least all of the woody things. But at this time, they would only have formed a very low, open, um, woody vegetation, not much higher than my height, and plenty of open, bare ground there. Notice the proportion of grasses and sedges um, without tree cover. And it was at this time the temperature rose fairly quickly up to 8000 BC or thereabouts. And it was this time when there would have been a flood of plants coming in from further south from the refugia. And we got there plants which nowadays we have separated out into maritime and others. But at that time, they would all flock in, like a lot of immigrants. How did I get rid of those? I don't know. That's very annoying. Um, this flint was said to be about 8,000 years ago, so that would be about this time. You notice that we begin to get here, we get a climate that was very dry and warmer, um, maybe as warm as we get in the warmest years recently. But here, things began to get uh, rather more Atlantic, although the North Sea hasn't been completely flooded and joined up with the um, with with the English Channel. And here notice that we're beginning to get what we call the mixed deciduous forest developing. Uh, Hazel here in amongst the birches originally, but later amongst the oak wood. And grasses, you notice that get less as the trees increase. Willows decreased a bit as the forest trees developed. Similarly with juniper. Uh, Later, you get a more open woodland, probably man having started have an influence on it. And um, here you've got more grassy sedges, heather developing. But the interesting thing, and I don't know if you can see it, how do I get rid of these? What did I do before? I don't know, but I'm sorry you will not be able to see the little scatter of records of things like Jacob's Ladder, Purple Saxifrage, Sandfoil, which you can't see, all plants that we don't get nowadays, but were present. Jacob's Ladder may only have disappeared during the 19th century. But we've also got a scatter of mountain islands. I just see it was a saxifrage, that's yellow mountain saxifrage, and there were a few records of gentians and also of hoary rock rose. There must have been a lot of both of those for pollen to be sufficient to be deposited in the peat, in amongst the peat to give us this record. Well, what sort of place since then you will know that the species which I've been indicating were much more widespread and abundant have become, in fact, very scarce. Um, they became scarce because of the development of the high forests that cause shade, and these plants do not like shade. They're what we call um, light demanders, and even if they get shade of about oh, uh, 10-inch tall grass, that's too much for some of them. Uh, so they survived in what we call refugia. These have got places with calcareous, they were all calcareous sites, but shallow soils, some which are very dry, as you get on uh, sugar limestone. Uh, bear with me. I think I've lost something. Uh, yes, here we are. Sugar limestone with its sandstone-like texture. Uh, Wet habitats, those are dry, wet habitats like the calcareous, gravelly flushes, uh, cliffs here, and you can't see, but that's river margins. There's some bits of shrubby sanctuary by the river margin. Some of the plants would have survived in the species rich grasslands in between the rather open um, tall birch forest. But we've also got some kind of a mystery here in Teesdale. If you look closely at this picture, I was going to say, point out Winniebank Farm, just where my pointer is. There's the Tees to the left of it. And here we've got the edge of Oh, sorry. My fingers. Here we've got the edge of Cronkley, and that is Winbank Fell there. And in between the two is where the teasers come. This is a different view, and you've got Cronkley there, Winbank just out of sight on the right, and this shows you the split between the two which have the T's in it. A different view again taken from further up the T's, looking back down the T's. So we've got this gap between the two fells. I don't know when it occurred, and if any of you could tell me, I'd be very grateful for the knowledge. This means we are left with these species on Crocketfell, mountain avens, hoary rock rose, early spring sedge, they're in flower, here's its leaves, and horseshoe vetch with the photograph of the years when it did flower. That's a while ago. On Winniebank Fell, we've got Teesdale Violet. That's what the fruit looks like. We've got Bartsia, Alpina, And oh, thrift, sea thrift. Um, so we've got some species on one fell and some species on the other. Well, I don't know why. It would be good to know when they gorge between the two fells um, did occur, but I guess it was long before the last ice period. This is just top of Fell. This, these are flowers. I wish you could see them better. They're a sort of pale, moving pink colour. And at certain times, if you're on Fell, you will see a mass of those that are about 9-10 inches high, and they are growing in amongst mountain avens, mountain avens, um, and early spring sage. And I was going to show you basil leaves, which were somewhere out of sight on the right hand side. Here is a map produced by John O'Reilly, who many of you would know because you've heard him give talks on the Teesdale Flora. John has been working on the distribution of about 100 um, special plants of Upper Teesdale, all of them in rare in for one reason or another. He's almost completed his survey of Windybank Fell. The blue is the area which he has covered, he surveyed, and here we have false sedge. The red is where he has found it on Windybank Fell along right in the wet areas below the sugar limestone, round above largest quantity, above Windybank Farm, which is there. These are some of the flushed areas near Windybank Farm, and also the top of Sunsite, with a few scattered areas in between. Notice the large quantity of red on Windybank Fell. Cronkite Fell, where so far he has recorded the wet areas. He hasn't recorded the sugar limestone ones yet. And if you pick it out, there's Cobresia there. Oh, sorry. Cobresia there, and a tiny bit of it over there. That's all. So that's a difference of proportion, which goes with the difference of some species on one fell and some on the other. Curious, curious. I think so. Well, what has happened to the flora? We can only tell what is happening. I should say hasn't, is happening to the flora, and why in general there's big decline in species distribution, the quantity of each species. We can't tell that without we can get no knowledge of the distribution of each species. And this is what John has been doing. We're fortunate, certainly on Windybank Fell, on having records for the bedding for the species, about 25 of them, rare species on the sugar limestone area adjacent to where Cowgreen Reservoir is now, that I organised, and it was done in the 1970s. And John has been able to make comparisons between the 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 area covered by plants at that time and the area that as he has found um, of the extent of the same species um, during 2017 to 19. And evidence of decline here we've got with we can just see this percentage figures at the end here. I've picked out a few species from a longer table that he gave. Hoary Rock Rose down by 89%. Mountain Everlasting down by 84. Yellow Mountain Saxifrage down by 70. Northern Bed Straw down by 65. Gentians down by 54%, meaning where in the 1970s, where you would have found gentian plants, the area covered by gentian plants, now it's only half. When you see gentians in flower, you may think, oh, there's still the same amount. But when you get down to it and do a careful record, we find we've lost half of them in that time. Early spring sage are not so abundant, are lost 45%. And this is, it changes name, Minuatis stricta, bog sandwort, which only grows in Teesdale in the whole of the United Kingdom. That has reduced by 94%. And this is only up to 2019. Later, I'll show you the effect of the last few years on one species in particular. Average decline is just over half, but I think it's very much more important to see what the decline is for individual species rather than averages. Why is that not moving on? Sorry. Yes, evidence here of decline of the dwarf milkwort. Now, these are records which were started by me and research students back in 1969, and records here from 1970. These are in mark plots where we were recording the occurrence over in the same area of ground. And notice up to 75. This is Cronkley Fell. We've got it on Cronkley Fell. A gradual decrease. I think some protection from grazing was established here, and we did get the increase. But just look at the Winniebank ones, 1, 2, 3 sites, and there, these two sites maintained pretty well the same population. This one did decrease a bit towards the end. I was away for a while. When I came back, I worked hard at finding the original plots, which had permanent markers, and started recording again. Um, I'm doing the Winnipeg Fell ones. Lizzie and Richard are doing the Cronkley ones. But notice here that goes up to 300. This only goes up to 120. And the figures, particularly for Cronkley, are depressingly low. Very, very low indeed. This is Caligula, a photograph of a Caligula plant in 2018. You might remember 2018, the summer got very hot and dry. And this is showing signs of stress and was in fact dying. Uh, it should be a nice dark green. It was yellow green. The plants didn't flower. And can I remember? I know I lost a large number of plants. I think I went from 29 to 12. And it's now down to 6 in the same plot. Uh, oh, I thought I had a set of. Yes. Uh, Other species which show signs of stress in uh, 218, these are violet leaves looking very purple. Quite a lot of plants go, certainly these days, go purple under stress conditions. There are a few more things here showing dead leaves. And here is a little cluster of hoary whitlow grass. Certainly, I know it's not looking very healthy, very happy, and there are other things here looking very dry. Our hot summers are not suiting these plants. It's not only the hot summers, it's the cold, dry springs we've been having for a number of years. Times when it ought to be warming up, and it isn't. Have I missed something? No. Right. Well, that is the main part of my talk. It's all linked with the Teesdale Special Flora Research and Conservation Trust, to give it its full title. That also now includes the Upper Teesdale Botany Group, abbreviations of the trust there. If any of you would like to support us, there is a website and there's a reference. And some final thoughts. Teesdale, the flowers of Teesdale are not all for which Teesdale is unique. I'm not the only one who knows that after a day up there in Teesdale, even if I'm not recording plants, that I feel better somehow. Something about the air, I think. However, I do sometimes say to people, and I do sometimes remember to do this myself, Stand still. Be quiet. Look at the sky and the clouds. Listen. What can you hear or not hear? What can you smell? What can you taste? Take a mouthful. I used to be able, on an east wind, to taste the chemicals from all the chemical industrial cheeses. Fortunately, we don't now. What are you standing on? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it squashy? Is it squishy? Take a pause. And now look at the sky again and the clouds again and listen and smell and feel. I hope after all of that you do feel relaxed. Thank you. Hang on. Yes, thank you for listening. And any other questions if you want to ask them now? Have we got a problem? I can't hear you. Oh dear.
Can anybody please put their questions into chat, and then I'll see.
I
Can
think
somebody?
you will have to email the. If you have any questions, email them to me.
Margaret, hang on a minute. If I
Okay.
give Margaret a ring, and I'll see if she can switch off and switch back again. Is there somebody who can actually talk to other people? Will I just give her a ring and see what we can do? I've forgotten Margaret's telephone number. I'm doing my best. Where's she gone?
Hello, Driss.
Hello, Margaret. Right, we can either get you. Are you there, Margaret?
Yes.
Yeah. If you just take your headphones off a minute, and if anybody has any questions, if they want to ask me, then I can ask you.
Right.
Or they can put them into chat and we can ask them at a later date. Which way? Which way would you?
Was I say the questions now?
Right.
Can you relate them to me?
I can do. So if
Good.
we can do it that way. If anybody, can you all hear me?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
What's my? Everybody can hear me.
Mm.
If you can place the question to me, and I can then place it to Margaret. For some reason or other, I can't see everybody. I can't see everybody on screen. But if anybody has a question, can they ask the question, and then I will ask Margaret. Margaret, we have one question from Martin, who is asking, would you expect the southern species to do better than northern species over time?
You mean if the climate's warming?
I presume so.
It's very difficult to tell. It just is difficult to tell. One thing we've got to bear in mind is the plants on Wittybank and Cronkley, if conditions get warmer and it suits them, they don't have a sort of mountain slope that they can move up. Available habitats are probably already occupied with something. If those plants that didn't, if those plants for which the warmer climate doesn't suit, say the Arctic alpine types, they might create more space for the warmer loving plants. On the other hand, if conditions got extreme enough and a lot of the blanket bog started decaying, then it could expose a lot more sugar limestone and flushed areas, which in that case would be great probably for all the plants that are now so restricted.
Right. Thank you, Molly. Before we go on any further, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult because I can't.
Press escape on your keyboard.
Pardon?
Press escape on the keyboard.
Yes, hang on.
Right, now press close. Can you see sharing screen somewhere on the screen?
Chat, do share.
Should be across the bottom within the...
No, it seems to have gone to the top, Trish.
Oh, well, of course,
But
it always does, doesn't it? I'll
I've
tell
got
you what, if
something
I
that
take
says
that off,
new share.
that's
No,
better.
I
There
don't
we are.
want
I've
to.
managed to take it off you completely. Right, thank you very much, everybody, for bearing with me. Does anybody else have a question that... Now I can see you. Now I can see if anybody is asking a question.
Got rid of that.
Martin, is that you having a question?
No. I've just had my question released.
Martin, oh, I need, sorry, Martin, no. Sorry, Martin, can you ask the question again? Martin, Utenbach?
Oh, I asked a question about northern and southern species.
Right, okay, so your question's been answered.
My question is all sorted, thanks.
Richard Clark has a question as to whether the reservoir has actually made any difference to...
That's a question that often comes up. There has been a difference in temperatures close to the ground, but unfortunately, I set up my recording plots 3 different distances from the reservoir, within 100 meters, round about 300 meters, and 600 meters, in the hopes I could pick up something which might be directly related to the presence of the reservoir. You'll appreciate that a large body of water will warm up in the summer and will get colder than the average in the winter. And this certainly has affected the local temperature in that the cold, which relates to winter conditions, extends a bit further round into what we would think of as spring, but autumn extends a bit, the warmer autumn extends a bit nearer towards Christmas. Christmas. However, my good intentions of having plots to record at 3 different distances from the reservoir, because we had more than one sample site at each level for each species, we found there was too much variation between the sites of each site than there was between there was too much variation within each distance from the reservoir to be able to identify differences that might have been related to the reservoir. This is very disappointing for me. However, I then decided we should just have to use this recording as part of a population dynamics study, which we would have done in any case. But as far as I know, no one else has nobody else has done any recording which would help to show if any particular species was doing better or less well. I was not on the committee that gave out the money for the people who were doing research. I had to struggle to get money to do what I thought was a good idea. I mean, we don't know.
Another question yet to be answered, isn't it?
Well, it's too late now.
Yeah. Does anybody else have a question? Lizzie, are you? Oh, Mike Whetstone.
Yeah. Is there any sense, and possibly none, I know, but is there any sense in watering any of these rare plants? Is there only so few left? I know that wild plants should survive on their own, but if they aren't, and one of the pictures showed heat-stressed plants, you know, if that was the case in my garden, I would go and water it.
Margaret?
Yes?
Mike was asking do you feel that there's any benefit in actually going and watering some of these plants that are showing signs of heat stress?
Trish, I think, will you start again?
Mike was asking whether you feel there was any benefit in watering any of these plants that are showing signs of heat stress.
I don't know, Mike. I don't know.
There's another chat.
I think it would be quite an undertaking to arrange for that. It's no good just going up. I don't think it's any good going up once a week with a watering can.
Yeah.
You need some way in which to no.
Thanks, Margaret.
If anyone else would like to contribute there in the question of adding water to them. Yeah.
Naomi Grace in the chat has asked, would you expect any wind-borne transfer of species between Cronkley and Widdybank, and what's the prevailing wind direction?
The other way round.
I don't think so.
Right.
Looks like Nicola and Derek had questions.
Right, okay. Nicola?
That was my question. And
that was your question.
question.
Lizzie, I think, had a question first as well.
Yeah, Margaret often talks about the number of flowers and fruits on some of the rare plants. Can you talk a little bit about the life cycles of the rarer plants and their importance?
No.
Sorry, I've got no voice.
Yeah, Margaret, Lizzie is stating actually that you spend a lot of time talking about the flowers and the fruits on the plants. Could you actually just give a little brief overview of the life cycle of the plants?
The importance of them.
The importance of the life cycles.
Life cycle. Most of them are in fact perennial. Gentians reproduce vegetatively. We found there was a turnover of rosettes of gentian of 30% each year. A turnover, so you lost 30%, you gained 30% from vegetative growth, and we were recording just the rosettes. Sorry, Dryas is a long-lived perennial. I just think that horseshoe vetch must be a long-lived perennial. Hoary rock rose similarly. polygola. Dwarf milkwort is a short-lived perennial, about 6 to 8 years if it's doing well, and then it seems to give up, but hopefully it doesn't produce a lot of seed, but they are large seeds, and when they germinate, the two cotyledons are quite large and green and persist for a long time. Violets from seed similarly, though I think violet plants are quite long-lived. Hybrids, I'm getting the impression now, not so long-lived. It's my impression that a lot of these plants spend the early couple of years or so in producing very extensive fibrous root systems, and those are deep and enable the plants under more normal circumstances to survive the slight changes in soil moisture. Drabber, well, normally drabber would be a biennial, dying after flowering, but growth is so slow in Teesdale to begin with that it's usually 2 or 3 years old at least when it first flowers. If the flower shoots get eaten, it will produce side shoots, so some plants do live a bit longer. But once the plant has really flowered, then it dies. But it does produce large quantities of seed if it gets a chance to produce seed. But I think the demise of drabber, certainly on Windbank Fell, has been largely due to grazing by rabbits, which, if they didn't eat the flowers, I'm pretty certain they ate the fruit pods. Carrot species perennial, as far as I know. Bog sandwort, perennial plant. Okay, if you want any more plants, give me a name. I think it's good just to be remembering them.
That was great.
I don't know if I've sent it out to you, but I'll ask Trish to do it. There are 2 tables from the work done by Pat Doody during, I think, years probably 2 to 5 of the setup, and they're very useful, giving you some of the information you were just been asking for.
Thank you, Margaret.
Right, thank you, Margaret. That leads on to Joanna's Tate's question. Are you there, Margaret?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wasn't sure whether you could hear me or not. As to whether anybody is actually trying to grow on these plants yet, and are we actually growing any of these in artificial environments?
No, not yet is all I could say there, but you need to be very, very careful. You really do need to know about the life cycle of the plants before you start helping yourself to what few seeds they produce, or taking chunks with taking parts of the plants away, and then find you're not able to propagate them at all. This all needs rather careful search, but this is part of one of the projects for which we got the money from the Green Recovery Fund. I think it comes some way out of the things you're looking after, David. David Otway.
I think
Go.
David's on. Is David on mute?
Any more questions?
Did you want me to speak?
I don't know if you want to.
It's
Is
early
it under
days with
your
that part of
remit?
the project.
Pardon? It's early days under that part of the project, Margaret.
Pardon?
David says it's early days for that part of the project.
Well, yes, because at the moment, most of what David took on two of the projects, and the one that's concerned, it is largely a desktop study discovering what has been done and what might be possible and how you might go about it. So maybe after that's been completed, look like next year, we might consider starting some propagation. You've got, when you start thinking about propagation, even if you manage to grow plants from seed, which I know is possible, or you manage to propagate from cuttings or similar, you've got to think where you're going to put them and how you're going to get them established in the wild. It's different from growing them in a plant pot or even in a garden. And when the reservoir was being proposed, there was a lot of talk then about taking plants from the reservoir basin, the rare plants from the reservoir basin, and establishing them somewhere else. But when you think about the availability of the habitat outside the immediate area, and certainly outside the part that was going to be flooded, you don't have much choice because suitable habitats are occupied, maybe to the extent they can be occupied. There was an attempt, I think, organized by the, I forgot what it's called, the Teesdale, organized by the small committee, mainly of profs, who administered ICI money that was provided for research. And they did get an area on Winterbank Fell, excavating the glacial till, the overlying glacial till, was largely removed from a site. I could show it to you, but I don't think they went down far enough to get down to the sugar limestone and really expose it. And it wasn't adjacent to an area which had got rare species in it. And you can go and have a look at this area. This would have been done in late 1960s. You can work that out. What is it? 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's been colonized by a few common plants. 2 years ago, I think it was John O'Reilly did manage to find one patch, one colony of Strawberry Carno. How the seed got there, I don't know. Whether somebody has deposited it or whether I don't know how the seed got there. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find any plants last year. There may be some, We'll certainly have a look this year. But by and large, that area has not been colonised by any of the rare species. I don't think it was put in the right place, and I don't think they went deep enough to get to the sugar limestone. Well, I wasn't consulted at all. It's only after it had been done that I would discover there was anything planned. So that helped.
Yes, I think it has. I think you've given David lots to think about as well. Do we have any other questions anywhere? On that note, to save my phone bill and to save your sanity, Margaret, I think it's probably time to call this meeting to an end. And thank you very much for participating under extreme circumstances.